Good morning, everyone. I appreciate you joining this session with Learning with Leverage. My name is Marcus King, and today we're going to talk about what audits are required. This is just a 30-minute session. Some go 45, some can go an hour. If everybody has lots of questions, then we can definitely go that long, but we're only scheduled for 30 minutes today, then hopefully, give you back the rest of your hour and do whatever else. I just want to say, feel free to put any questions in the chat. I will answer any and all of them to the best of my ability. Some might not be able to answer and may have to get back to you on that. So, Mr. Kevin, I see that you're raising your hand. If you want to, put your question in the chat, I'm not sure if I'm allowed to or can let you speak or anything like that. But if you want to just go put your question or statement in the chat, feel free to answer that for you. So, going to, talk a little bit about, auditing and kind of what audits are required and whatnot. Always the fun slides are, just an introduction to myself, an introduction to the company. I'm not going to go all about the background and stuff like that, but the, most important two are the bottom two, especially the bottom one. Became a dad in August of 2022. So that's Caroline Grace right there. Had to show her off. Any parent, is more than happy to show off their kid at any chance they get. So I took advantage of this one. So and became a CPA during the height of COVID in 2020. So and vice president of CU Audit and Compliance Group, and a lot of other things there that look good on the resume, I guess. CUACG's background: we are wholly owned by the League of Southeastern Credit Unions. The reason for us to be on Learning with Leverage, as you know, Leverage is the for-profit side of LSCU. So in 2022, we audited over 246 credit unions, and we have many auditors spread throughout the Southeast, and we have in 2022 alone, we did over 1,000 audits and reviews. So I will say, I do remember one time, one of the last webinars that happened, that the chat was turned off. So if the chat is turned off, I'm going to put my cell phone number in the chat in case anybody would like to text it with a question or whatnot. That way, I know for some odd reason it was turned off, and I'm not sure how to turn it back on. So I've been trying to write in the chat. So if anybody would like to, text me a message or anything like that, hopefully you can see everything. So I'm trying to. I think I adjusted the chat a little bit. That way other people might be able to type in, and if you're not allowed to type in it right now. So give it a whirl. If not, then we'll just continue. And if you have a question, feel free to text my cell phone number, which I put in the chat. All right, a couple of audits that are just going to be discussed. This is not a encompassing list of all the audits that are required or not required or whatnot, but these are just the ones that I wanted to touch on. If you want me to talk about another one, I might not have the exact regulation off the top of my head, but I can give you the best answer that I can. And if I don't know the answer, be able to get back to you. So we're going to talk about the annual. We're going to talk about a couple of compliance audits, of course, the BSA, the ACH, and the SAFE Act, the website, member account verification, and a cash account. Let's go ahead and dig right in. Like I said, if you have any questions, feel free to, text me. Don't call me. I might not be able to answer during this. So, or put it in the chat. So talking about the annual audit, there are two ways that the credit union can complete their annual audit. There is also a third, but I've never seen it happen. So basically, if you're under 500 million in assets, you can go with a supervisory committee audit, which is basically agreed upon procedure audit, where whatever procedures are listed out in the contract, and then that is exactly what the procedures are going to be. There's not really any liability with the CPA firm, since the CPA firm is actually just detailing the procedures, doing the procedures that are in the contract. Now, if the credit union is over 500 million in assets, then a financial statement audit performed in accordance with generally accepted auditing standards is required. In other words, an opinion audit or a financial statement audit. So if you're over 500 million in assets, you've got to have an opinion audit, or if you're under 500 million, you can go with the agreed upon procedure audit. However, if you still want to have an opinion audit, you can absolutely have an opinion audit, but that is not the requirement. So just speaking for myself, I performed supervisory committee audits from credit unions with 40,000 in assets all the way up to 400 million in assets. So we kind of wide range of the gamut there. And, financial statement audit, most people think they, there's liability with the CPA firm there. So, if you like to cover all your bases, then it might be good to have an opinion audit. But they do pretty much cost double to triple what agreed upon procedure audit does cost. So, that's all up to the risk of the supervisory committee. If the supervisory committee, wants to cross all their T's and dot all their I's and, can afford an opinion audit, feel free. But, if everything's going well during the year and you're under 500 million in assets, not many things are popping up on the interim audits or anything like that, then, agreed upon procedure supervisory committee audit, might be the best option for you. But then again, it's all up to the supervisory committee and what the supervisory committee would like best. I will say, if you are in the state of Georgia, different states may require different regulations for state chartered credit unions. If you're a federal credit union, the NCUA kind of dictates the rules and everything like that for federal credit unions. But if you're a state chartered credit union, that means you have to go by the laws of each state and whatnot. For instance, the state of Georgia, it's a little different than what the state of Alabama, Florida, or Tennessee might be. So I know Illinois is a little different as well. So, different states might have different regulations and stuff like that. Could go into detail as to why I think that is, but in the end, that would just be my opinion, and don't want to don't want to tell you my opinion on a lot of things here. Just want to give you the facts, and just talk about what audits are required and whatnot. So that kind of details the annual audit, and the NCUA rules and regulations is 715.7. So that is what the audit is based off of per the NCUA regulations. BSA, every credit union has to have a BSA audit. No matter how large you are, no matter how small you are, every credit union has to have a BSA audit. And that is pertinent to NCUA regulation 748.2. And the frequency is not, most credit unions policies do say 12 to 18 months or every calendar year or annually, or something like that. So I do have a credit union that our policy says 12 to 18 months, so we're going every 18 months no matter what. So it might not be, their policy might not state every calendar year or anything like that. It says every 18 months, so we're going to 18 months on the dot. That is when we're going to have our BSA audit. But I can't say that every credit union has that in the policy, but I have seen the policies that come from Policy Pro. It does say 12 to 18 months. So, just make sure you read your policy, and whatever your policy states, that's the best to base it off of and whatnot. So, basically this part says, the BSA officer can't perform the BSA audit. It has to be someone, independent, must be performed by a person or persons not involved with the function being tested or any other BSA related functions at the credit union. Don't take the bank out. So that may present a conflict of interest or independence. So a lot of the credit unions that we see, they have a third party complete the BSA audit. And I have seen some supervisory committee members. That way they want to be more and more involved. So they do perform the BSA audit. And, I honestly haven't seen many federal or state examiners have a problem with that. So I would recommend that, like I said, the BSA officer not do it. If you're pertinent to, doing OFAC or filing the FinCEN or, doing a lot of the CTRs and SARs, probably not best. You're probably a little compromised there, and that it wouldn't be an independent audit if somebody like that did it. So it's always best to have, the most separation that you can, the most independent person that you can perform the audit. So, supervisory committee is always great. If your company can or your credit union can hire a third party, that's always great as well. And just a couple of things that the audit's going to include, like we talked about, FinCEN 314A, 314B, if you're part of the information sharing network, OFAC, a lot of new accounts, wires, ACH, IETs, beneficiaries have to be checked against the OFAC listing. I do want you to remember FinCEN and OFAC are two different things. FinCEN, you have to check every 2 weeks most of the time, unless, something happens when there may be a terrorist attack that happens, then the FinCEN might come more frequently than that. But most of the time, it's every 2 weeks that the FinCEN 314A comes out. And then OFAC, of course, we have to run our all new members and, our entire membership base against the OFAC listing on a regular basis as well. Regular basis can mean many different things. So it's kind of interpret up to the credit union on how much risk you would like to take. Of course, got to review the CTRs and the SARs, make sure, look at the excessive cash transaction report, making sure all the CTRs are filed based off that, and, reviewing the suspicious activities and stuff like that. Of course, reviewing your policies, reviewing some wires and other things like that as well, making sure you're up to date on your training and different things. So I'm not going to go in depth with everything that a BSA audit should include, but those are just the hot topics that we see, that we think, all BSA audits should include. So up next, we're going to jump to the ACH audit. Who must complete an ACH audit? So any depository financial institutions, third-party service providers, or third-party senders. So break it down to very simple terms. If you have checking accounts, it's more than you're going to need a ACH audit. So some credit unions, there's actually some larger credit unions that don't have checking accounts. They just have, CDs accounts and share accounts for their members. Most of the larger credit unions that have that, will need an ACH audit as well. But, the rule of thumb, if you have checking accounts, you'll need an ACH audit because you have ACHs going in and out of all the members' accounts as well. But if you're a small credit union, if you don't have checking accounts, you might not need an ACH audit. So all of this was taken directly from the, ACH guide that is released every year, audit guide. So these are not my own words. So I can't take credit for all of them. So, everything that I have wrote out here is basically, from, the NCOA guide or from the Payments First or NACHA guide or, going with Safe Act regulations or even the examiner guide as well. So, everything like that. I don't want any of my own words to be in here. I want, to give everybody facts and not, my opinion on things. So, who can perform the ACH audit? Audit committee, supervisory committee, audit manager, senior level officer that's not involved in the ACH activity, any external auditor, of course, third-party service providers and stuff like that. So one point that, I thought was pertinent that I wanted everybody to know, ACH operations staff can assist the auditor with information, but cannot perform the audit. We have to have the ACH operational staff in order to give us the documentation and give us access to the different items that we need. So it's pertinent that, ACH operations staff assist the auditor. They just can't perform the auditor. And of course, whoever's performing the audit, they have to, know the NACHA operating regulations and be familiar with all the ACH entries, all the same day entries and stuff like that. So I will say ACH is one thing that's always changing. every time we buy the new ACH auditing guide, there's always new things that pop up. And, I'm sure different webinars talk about many different ACH changes that happen during the year as well. So there's always something new with ACH. I don't think you can ever, be an ACH expert. But you can also, you can always apply for that designation as well and take the test and everything like that through the National Association. Oh, ACH Part 2. All ACH audits must be completed by December 31st of each year. It cannot be completed in January. It cannot be completed in February. If you're going to have an ACH audit, it has to be completed by the end of the year each year. So if you've ever, worked with an auditing firm that does ACH audits, the last week of the year can be a little hectic with people trying to get in their ACH audits. We try to schedule out months in advance, but there's always going to be some procrastinators out there that want the ACH audit completed right at the end of the year. So it happens. What must be covered? Of course, just like the BSA, policies and procedures, OFAC regulations, disaster recovery, data security. That's one of the big things that's been added to the ACH audit, this platform over the past couple of years, is data security and online banking products that uses the ACH network. So, if your credit union opens all new accounts online, or a lot of new accounts online, it has to be, you have to get the money from somewhere. You have to directly debit a member's account to, fund the account. So, just different things like that use the ACH network with, mobile banking and online banking and all that fun stuff. So just a couple things that the ACH audit includes. But, if you need to remember one thing for the ACH audit, it is that it has to be completed by December 31st of each year. Safe Act. Safe Act audit is, of course, for mortgages. If the credit union originates more than 5 mortgages in the past year, then a Safe Act audit is required. Doing all the digging into the Safe Act regulation, this was the best way for me to kind of show you the 5 mortgage rule. In this exception, it writes, the Safe Act regulation provides an exception to an MLO registration requirement for any employee of a covered financial institution who has never been registered or licensed through the registry as an MLO if during the past 12 months the employee acted as an MLO for 5 or fewer residential mortgages. So as everybody probably knows, Safe Act deals with mortgage licensing, making sure that everybody is registered that performs a mortgage loan with the National Association. So if your credit union performs less than 5 in the past year, then there's no need to be registered, and then there's no need to have an audit. So only if you originated more than 5 mortgages in a year is a Safe Act audit required. So I know I kind of went into the weeds with that one a little bit, but if you don't do more than 5 mortgages in a year, then a Safe Act audit isn't required because of the exception that we wrote down there. Website, of course, based on state to state regulations and stuff like that. But I have not found any federal regulation or anything that says that credit unions must have an annual website audit. However, if you read your website policy, most website policies state that the website will be annually reviewed. So always make sure that you read your policy, make sure you, and if in your policy that's been approved by the board of directors says that, our website will be reviewed annually by a third party. Well, that's what gets a lot of credit unions there, that, need to have a website audit, is that, it states it in their policy. And you better believe when the examiners roll around, they're going to, take all your policies. They're going to, look them over. They're going to make sure that you follow your policies. And if your policy states that your website will be reviewed annually and you haven't completed one in the past, 2 to 3 years, you can guarantee that will be a finding in your latest report as well. just part of it. But as for NCUA regulations and stuff like that, I haven't seen one that states that an annual website review is required. Now it does state different items like third party, pop-up links and stuff like that. If your credit union has a link to the NCUA on your website, you need a third party pop-up, you are going to a different website, are you sure you want to go to this website? Yada, 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 different things like that. So, that is required, that is recommended by the NCUA, but as the audit itself, I haven't found any regulations. So if you have, feel free to let me know, then I will definitely change my tune on this, but I haven't saw anything that's required. It's just written in most credit unions policies. Up next, we're going to talk about the member account verification. So this is directly from the Supervisory Committee Audit Guide. If you're a federal credit union and most state credit unions, a member account verification is only required every 2 years. But if you perform an opinion audit or in the state of Georgia, it is required every year. But most other states that we found and most other things like that is only required for, every 2 years for credit unions. And part of what it includes is balancing the loans and shares to the general ledger. So whatever your membership trial balance has, during the member account verification, it should balance that to your general ledger, making sure everything's, in balance. Because, if the general ledger doesn't match the membership trial balance, then, there's an error that has occurred somewhere. And, that's kind of part of why we like to, we have to send the member statements to the members to make sure, everything is correct and stuff like that. So it can be positive or negative. Of course, a positive verification is when, a statement is sent to the member and they have to confirm it and actually send it back to the third party and stuff like that. But if it's just a negative verification, then, the statement is sent. If nothing's wrong with it, then no action is required. So that's kind of just the gist of the positive verification and a negative verification. If you do a positive verification, then, you can, of course, do a sample. If, doing a positive verification of your whole membership base, that's pretty over the top there. I haven't seen a positive verification of the whole membership base. But, of course, if you're doing a negative verification, then you can send it to the whole membership base. And if something's wrong, then, then that's when they can contact you. But the big thing here with the account verification, the address on the statement must be different. The return address on the statement must be different than what the credit union's address is. I think I wrote that wrong. So it should say the address on the statement must be different than what the credit union's actual address is. So, of course, for the account verification, it has to be independent. It has to be sent back to, it can be the supervisory committee's home address or something like that, or it can be your audit committee's address or your third party, auditing firm that performs it. But it cannot be sent back to the credit union's PO box. It cannot be sent back to the credit union's physical address. So whatever address that you put on the statement must be different than what the credit union's normal address is. So, like I said, for the ACH audit, those have to be completed by December 31st. That was the one thing I wanted you to remember. And with the account verification, the address must be different on the statement than what the credit union's actual address is. Last but not least, we are going to talk about cash counts. Now, if you've ever performed a cash count for anybody, or cash, these are no fun. So, as an auditor, walking into a credit union's branch, right when they open in the morning and seeing, the employees roll their eyes, saying, "Oh, it's time for another audit." Well, we have a job to do. You have a job to do. So, let us do our job. Let us count the cash and do what we need to do, and we'll be out of here as soon as we can. So, I will say, if you've ever worked as a teller, you probably, didn't like your cash being counted. well, I can tell you from an auditor standpoint, we don't like performing the cash counts, but accordance to the audit guide and accordance to NCUA's exam guide, cash counts are required. So this is straight from the Supervisory Committee Audit Guide. It says determine if cash counts are performed at least monthly or in accordance with the credit union's policy by management or a supervisor. So cash counts must be performed in accordance with the policy. So, just like dating back to the website that we review, website policy of talking about how often the audit is required, it states here, in accordance with the credit union's policy, must be performed, by management or a supervisor or something like that. So if you want to have a third party audit, that's, even great. Or if you want to have, the teller or the branch manager perform the cash count once a month or once a quarter or something like that, is kind of up to the discretion of management and the supervisory committee of how often, that wants to be done. If you have a credit union that, there's a lot of entries in the cash over and short, it might be good to, perform a cash count more often. And if you're a credit union that don't have any entries in the cash over and short, it might be a good idea to do a cash count as well, because, the tellers might not be, showing that they've lost, or, if a teller is showing that they've had their, drawer in balance for one consecutive year, it might be a good idea to count their cash, because they might not, I know things happen like that. Pennies are lost, nickels are lost, quarters are sometimes lost, or, especially with the new money that comes out, they can easily be stuck together. So, it's always a good idea to, perform cash counts more often than not. And one thing that this is straight from the NCUA Examiner's Guide. It talks about reviewing, policies for vault and teller operations, including but not limited to vault access and count shipment replenishment, and determining if the credit union's vault counts are adequately and current. And basically the middle section here talks about the same thing, and determine, surprise cash counts. And the last part down here kind of talks about, determine if management, the supervisory committee, or other designated third parties is performing periodic surprise cash counts of the, teller drawers, vault, and ATMs. Once again, it doesn't give an exact answer. Just like with any regulation that you read, you're not going to get an exact answer. So, periodic and surprise. So I can't tell you how often, that, it should be done. But, I will tell you, I will give you an opinion. I told you I won't give you many opinions during this, but, one thing, we recommend cash be, counted at least, every quarter. There are some credit unions that, cash is counted once a year or twice a year that we do the cash counts for, but they might have, more internal audits per se. They might have an internal auditor that goes around and counts the cash. But if you don't have any internal people going around count cash, I would recommend that it's performed, at least every quarter. Once again, I don't want to, give you opinions, but, I gave you one opinion there. So I told you I would do my best to get this, completed in under 30 minutes. So by my central time clock, it looks like it is 10:29. The time just changed. So if you're able to write anything in the chat, feel free to ask me any questions. Or if for some reason the chat isn't working again, feel free to email me, feel free to text me. If you want to call me, absolutely, I'll be able to talk, be happy and willing to talk with you just about, anything. So if you want to connect on LinkedIn, feel free to look me up, Marcus King, CPA. But if nobody has any questions, if nobody, has anything, then I appreciate everybody's attention today. I appreciate everybody joining, and I hope everybody has a good rest of your day, and feel free to, ask me any questions that you would like.